Hi, everyone. It's great to see everyone this afternoon. Well, if you're on the East Coast, I guess it is afternoon for you. If you give me 1 second, just trying to validate that we are live. It looks like everyone can see me. I'm looking at the chat, so perfect. Hello from Florida, Chattanooga. This is great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucinda Wade, and I am a product manager at the Digital Service for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We are part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And the digital service team with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, our goal is to hire tech talent, but hire great talent, I should say. And what we do is we deploy small responsive groups of designers, engineers, product managers, to CMS to work alongside dedicated public servants and to really solve some of the largest, most complex problems facing our healthcare system. A few things that we've been working on to support CMS has been in response to the No Surprises Act. We deployed CMS's Medical Bill of Rights site to really help the public understand their protections when using private health insurance, when not using health insurance, or if you don't have health insurance. And then we've also worked very closely with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, where we recently did a soft launch of the findsupport.gov site that really provides the American public with the resources needed to locate behavioral health services, which is very important in a time where mental health is really increasing in our country. Again, these are just a few examples of some of the things that technologists are doing in government, working very closely with dedicated public servants. And we're going to spend time today during our fireside chat talking with Jen Pahlka in more details about the role technologists play. So I'm thrilled to be here with you today and to really kick off today's Tech to Gov virtual event with our very special fireside chat with Recoding American author Jen Pahlka. I'll get to more detailed introduction in a moment, but I just want you to know that Jen is a true pioneer in making government work for the people in the digital age. Jen, thank you for being here and for being willing to share your wisdom and experience with us today. So during today's event, you're going to hear more about opportunities and challenges of delivering technology in government and what it takes to deliver better on the ground. Our chat's going to last about 45 minutes. We're going to save 20 to 25 minutes for audience questions and answers. So please be thinking about your questions. Once we get closer to that point, I'm going to let you know so you can start putting those in the chat. Now, I am thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Jen Pahlka. Jen Pahlka co-founded Code for America in 2010, a national nonprofit that brings the principles and practices of the digital era to government. In 2013, she took a leave of absence to serve as the United States Deputy Chief Technology Officer under President Obama and helped found the United States Digital Service, which brings world-class technologists and designers to government to improve digital service delivery. She served on the Defense Innovation Board under President Obama and President Trump. And at the start of the pandemic, she also co-founded the United States Digital Response, which really helps government meet the needs of the public with volunteer tech support. So Jen, welcome. I'm so thankful that you're here. It's great to have you in this fireside chat today.
It's great to be here, Lucinda, and I just want to start with a thank you to you for what you do at CMS, and I hope we get to talk a little bit about the wonderful work that CMS has been doing. But thank you for your service, and thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. So Jen, I am fascinated by your journey into government. In your book, you talked about your path from Code for America to Deputy CTO of the United States, and then under President Obama, and then back again. And not everyone has had a chance to read the book, but if you are registered for this event, your free copy is coming soon. So please get ready to start reading it because it's a great book. You're going to love it. You're not going to be able to put it down. But I want to start with just asking you to tell the audience more about your journey to government and why did you say yes to service?
Yeah, well, basically, I think I shamed myself into it by realizing that if I didn't do it, I would be a huge hypocrite. um, I had been running Code for America and asking people to go work with government for, for a couple of years at that point. And my hope in getting people to do this fellowship, which is not really how Code for America operates anymore, but at the time we ran this program that was a year-long fellowship. And I really hoped that as they did the fellowship, they would then go into government, and many of them did. And then here I was in this position a couple of years into running this nonprofit when Todd Park, who was the CTO at the time, said, come to federal government and work with me. And of course, there was a lot at stake. And I say that because I think for many of you here checking out government service, you also may feel that there is a lot at stake for you. I had a family in California. I needed to be in DC. Code for America was still young, and I didn't think that I could leave it permanently. But I ultimately, we figured out how to make it work. And I came in and did my year of service. And, while there were times when I wanted to give up, when it was so hard, and I was sometimes demoralized, I look back on that year as absolutely one of the best years of my life. And more importantly, that I just wouldn't be the person that I am today had I not done that. And so, it's not easy, but I really not only have no regrets, but I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that I had to serve. And so, I know that many of you will be making similar kind of trade-offs, and I encourage you to go for the brass ring.
Absolutely. Jen, as you tell your story about why you decided to serve, it makes me think about my own story.
Yeah.
And, mine really started with, being a young child, going to work with my dad and my sister, who's a little bit older, and seeing him. Is a public servant, served in our military, and seeing just the work he did to advocate for the people that he worked with, but also the people that they were serving. He worked at the state government level, but the people they were serving, and seeing that throughout my life really helped me realize like the role government plays and how it can really benefit many of us. But we have to understand like the needs of the citizens, the needs of the public, and what they need. And so I said yes because I wanted to be able to advocate for the American public, and I wanted to be able to advocate for my colleagues that are delivering those services.
Absolutely. It is really an honor.
Yeah, it is. It is. So Jen, let's pivot just a little bit, right? So once you landed in government, you saw the need for better technology right away. And in the book, you talk about the Veterans Benefit Management System, VBMS, and how your team was really able to help those developers get the system moving in the right direction so that veterans could receive their benefits. But also there's this other aspect around helping a team get unstuck, which I think in many cases in government, it's that happens, and we need to be able to identify it and really help to help those teams get unstuck. Can you share more about that experience and how that laid the groundwork for the U.S. Digital Service?
Yeah, I was working in the White House. USDS was not a thing yet, but we were advocating for it and planning for it. And one of the things we decided to do is just show what it would look like. And so I recruited a small team to come help with a problem that had been identified at the Veterans Benefit Management System at the Department of Veteran Affairs. And I had this moment the very first day of that engagement that stuck with me for a long time. And part of the reason it stuck with me is, though you're right, it's easy to see the need for better technology. I had for years heard people say, well, we just haven't invested in tech. And I don't think that's true. We do invest in tech. What we don't invest in is tech people, and people who are going to take the right approach to this. And I'll tell you what I mean. So my colleagues and I were talking with the senior leader at the VA, and this is a bit of a downer story, so prepare yourselves. We'll bring it back up, I promise. And I kept asking him, we kept asking him questions about this system. Why was it designed this way? Why did they make that choice? Why did they make? Kept saying, that's not my call. You'll have to ask the program people, or that's not my call. Ask the contracting officers who put this procurement together. And that was so counter to what I thought of as the role of a senior technology official. And I sort of started pushing him on it. Why are you deferring on all these key questions? And he said to me, I've spent my career teaching my people not to have an opinion on the business requirements. If they ask us to build a concrete boat, we'll build a concrete boat. And I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was shocking to me. And I said, why? And he said, that way, when it doesn't work, it's not our fault. Mm-hmm. And this was a gut punch, really. I mean, at the time, I think the statistic was that 18 veterans a day were committing suicide. And many of them were not getting the health benefits and the mental health benefits that we had promised them when they went into service for us. So to say it doesn't work, but it's not our fault, just felt like the worst thing I could possibly hear, having come to sort of help get technologists a better seat at the table so they could advocate for these systems working. But as much as I was sort of horrified by his response, it is not helpful to just demonize this person because he said that. The truth is that we have set up a system in which it is easy to say, this is how the process goes. We're going to follow that process. And it is absolutely true that in many cases, tech teams have been disempowered from making those decisions. And it is easier to say, I will just do what I have been told to do here by this process that has resulted in this set of enormous requirements that are going to inevitably result in a concrete boat. And it became very clear to me at that point that, we needed to reinvigorate the system, but the only way to reinvigorate the system was to go find those people who did have an opinion on the business requirements. And my colleagues and I then spent 2 weeks traveling around the country. Actually, a lot of this work doesn't get done in DC. We were in South Carolina and Austin, Texas with these teams. And he was absolutely not succeeding in keeping his people from having an opinion on business requirements, and going and talking to those people who truly did believe that we can and should and must serve those veterans, and elevating their ideas, outside of these constraints that they were stuck in, where the leadership was saying that, just let it go, just do what we're told. That is really what unstuck this process and got some movement on veterans benefit management system. And those, they can make all the difference. We just need to create an environment in which they can do it. And we just need more of those people. And, I had already been committed at that point to this notion that we've got to get the right people into government, and we've got to support them when they're in. And that moment cemented that to me. And I have been, trying to work on that ever since that moment, even harder.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, I have to say, like, for me, I'm very thankful you started US Digital Service. The US Digital Service team has been supporting CMS since, I think, 2014. And we have evolved into CMS establishing their own digital service team. We still leverage USDS expertise within our scope, but we are working closely with those public servants and engaging with different folks in different disciplines to really understand what the business process is, what some of the challenges are, understanding the policy that is driving some of these decisions. And so I'm really appreciative of the work that you've done to really establish USDS, and the work that's done in many other digital service teams across the federal government, and things we're also seeing happening at the state and local level.
Yeah. So much good stuff is happening. It's important to remember that.
Absolutely. So much good stuff. So Jen, you also talk about, and I'm going to reference many of your stories, but I love many of I won't say stories, but just experiences, because that's what they are, right? And you talk about this experience with the enterprise service bus, and it really rang a bell because when I was at State Department, we had an enterprise service bus, right?
Oh, Carrie,
Many agencies do.
sorry.
And then you also talk about the California Employment Development Department. I know these are really two stories that touch on how government can be risk averse and it operates in a waterfall approach. And these experiences for me shed light on really the need to empower government. And you talked about that in what we were just talking about, but really understanding what law or policy is driving our tech decisions and current processes, and really creating a culture of innovation or flexibility and being able to really share more across the environment. But can you share more about the experience and maybe how we as a government public services technologists can help to either mature or evolve the culture and empower the people so that they can either make the hard decisions or present some of those hard decisions to their leadership?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that is consistent across so many experiences that I have had and others like you and your colleagues have had is that the flexibility is there. It has been strangled. And this story of the enterprise service bus, I think, illustrates this well. This is something that happened to a colleague of mine who went on to work at the Defense Digital Service, part of the USDS family. He was asked to go to Raytheon and help with a project, again, that was really stuck. They were trying to update the software that runs the satellites that enable GPS, kind of an important thing, especially for people like me who need GPS, like to even walk around the corner. And he comes in, and the basic problem they're trying to solve is getting data from the satellite down to the ground station in time. And there's a really standard way of doing this. I am not technical, so if you know what I'm talking about, good for you. But there's a protocol called multicast UDP that's like easy peasy, standard thing, plug it in and it would do this. But they don't just have that. They have the UDP and then on one end and on the other end. And in the middle, they have inserted this enterprise service bus, which is this big complex piece of technology that takes so long to get the data through it and then back out to the other end that it's timing out every time. And they've been working on this for many, many months. By the way, the budget for this project has ballooned from something like 3 billion to 7 billion at this point. So we're not talking small dollars here. And this developer Weaver is looking at this going, why do you even have this thing in here? It would work fine with just the UDP. And they tell him it is a requirement in the contract that the Air Force put out, and Raytheon responded to. We can't take it out. He's like, that's crazy. And he goes and he researches why that is there. Mm-hmm. And it's true. It is a requirement that is sort of incorporated by default because it's a requirement in the Air Force enterprise architecture. And it's there in the Air Force enterprise architecture because it's there in the DoD enterprise architecture. And it's there in DoD because it's in, to some degree, the federal enterprise architecture. And you go and look where that came from. Well, Congress asked the White House to sort of put together a plan to make technology in the federal government better. And that resulted in this CIO council creating this federal enterprise architecture. Well, it turns out that if you really go read the federal enterprise architecture, nowhere in there does it say, thou shalt have an enterprise service bus. It uses it as an example of something I think we would all agree federal government needs more of, which is interoperability of data. Right. And back in the 90s when it was written, the ESB was a pretty standard way that you would do that, not the way. And certainly that was sort of somewhat deprecated as we went into the world of the web and APIs and sort of became better ways of doing it. But the I think the standard thing people would think here was, oh, they specified that in the 90s. Then we went into the web era and no one went back and updated it. The truth is, they did have the wisdom not to specify it. But what has happened over time is that as the people in the DoD wrote their document derivative of the federal enterprise architecture, and then the folks in the Air Force wrote their document that was derivative of the one above, the people writing those documents didn't have any technical expertise. And so they saw ESB and sort of copied it over. And in each layer down that hierarchy, they made it more and more required. It basically became more and more rigid and less like you could use this, until all the way at the bottom, it came out to you have to use this. And this is really typical of what happens. If you can go back and look at the actual law or policy that is governing the thing you're trying to do, inevitably you will find that there is flexibility there. And often when you see successful teams go back and get that flexibility that allows for what we often call innovation, but is really just like getting the job done.
Right.
It's because they've actually done the work to challenge that conventional wisdom that X or Y is required. It's not generally required, but it's a lot of negotiation to work sort of back up the channel and explain to folks who probably aren't technical, whose jobs are more around compliance, that this is not actually serving the intent of the law, both in terms of, hey, Congress didn't allocate these billions of dollars for us to get stuck on this. The intent of Congress there was to ship the software that works. But
Right.
also the CIO council in the White House never intended to lock these folks into this architecture that wouldn't work. And that is a kind of work that is needs to be done, is hard to do, involves a lot more human kind of negotiation than it is technical negotiation, but it's the kind of work that gets done. Now, I will say the end of this story, sadly, is not that we won. That stayed in there, and we shipped this software on these satellites without updating that part of it. They did go back into space, but this part of it sort of, used the old software. But very often I do see that changing. And it's just really important to remember the flexibility is there. It's your job to go find it. You can unstrangle the team if you do that kind of detective work.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate, and that story resonates. I spent some time working with the federal CIO, Claire Moderata, and her team as a White House Leadership Development Fellow. And that opened my eyes to really delving into understanding more about how law and policy is made and implemented, and working with Congress and working more with senior level folks in the administration, but also being able to wear my agency hat at the time and really think about the ability to implement what was being proposed. So I really do think you're spot on with how you articulate, like, that innovation is really just how do you get the job done, right? So we're getting close to Q&A. I want the audience to get ready to start putting their questions in. Jen, I want us to probably round out our fireside chat on a high note with the story that I think is very empowering, right? We talk about, or in your book, you talk about this experience around really leveraging technologists, product managers, designers, engineers, the people who get the day-to-day, are working day-to-day to keep things moving, operational, and they know what the problem is, and they have a recommended solution. You've alluded to that in some of the other experiences that you've shared. But as I read through that, I saw this as they are a connector or a bridge between this community of users, the public, policymakers, process owners, business owners. Can you share with us how you can see technologists serving in this role? And especially, I know there's one story that I think would be really great to hear around the Clear My Record story.
Yeah, well, let me share some principles first, and then I'll talk a little about Clear My Record. And I'm seeing this in the chat, by the way. Lots of people have had this experience. Start with why. The human negotiation part is the policy implementation part from Linda C. And start with why from David. And this, you all know a lot about this, but this work really starts with listening. There's a great quote by a great philosopher: "We have two ears and one mouth so that we may listen twice as much as we talk." Um, it's very easy to go into government and say, I know better. Let me tell you why I know better. And if you do that, you will probably not succeed. We have public servants in government who know why it is come about this way, and they have an enormous amount of knowledge. And yes, you may end up finding a way to shift some of that perspective that they have, but you're not going to succeed without understanding that perspective. And even if you lose the fight and don't get the software back on the satellites, you're going to learn so much that you will use not only in your work in public service, but you will have a richer life and a better career for it. I guarantee you. So not only listen, I think, but learn. It's one thing to listen. It's another thing to really take what you're hearing and make something of it. And when you're learning, I think you show respect. So it's really critical if you're going to work with someone, especially someone who may have a different perspective, like we can't take this ESB out, that you show them the respect that they came to that position authentically through real experience. And that if you have a different position, it doesn't mean you don't respect theirs. And then third, lift up. And I mean, lift your partners up, but I also mean lift the conversation up back to, I understand we're stuck at this level, for instance, of whether the ESB belongs or not, but can you lift back up to what was the intent? What were we trying to do here? I know that you think someone told us we have to use this, but someone also told us we were supposed to do X, get veterans their benefits, ship this software, whatever it is. And I think it's really easy to fight with somebody at that low level. And you don't win. You only win when you can reframe the conversation. And there's some famous stories in the book and in our community going around about people at USDS and in other places and in state government and local government, just reframing the conversation in a way that completely unlocks this. So yeah, one example of that from my work in local government through Code for America was this problem of records clearance, where there's a problem when we decriminalize, particularly marijuana, which has been happening a lot over the country, and I think over half the states now. People with marijuana convictions from past convictions have something on their record that is impossible to live with. A felony record makes it incredibly difficult to regain your life. You can't get a job. You can't live in public housing. There's something like 4,400 things you can't do with a felony record. But the thing you have a felony for is no longer a crime. And so these laws allow for the expungement of that off your record. But if it takes a year of going to the courts and filing paperwork and finding this and filling out forms to get that off your record, it's very near impossible to do. And in California, or in San Francisco particularly, when Prop 49 had passed, which decriminalized marijuana, a year later, only 23 people in the city and county of San Francisco had even started the process, and none of them had gotten through it. So this is, to me, this is really the focus of the book is, it's not really written for you guys in a certain sense. It is written for the general public to understand that we have an enormous gap between the intention of policy and law and the outcomes. And this is a really clear example of it. You pass a law and then essentially in that provision, at least, nothing is happening. Right. So we looked at this and said, we're going to have to streamline this. We're going to have to figure out ways to take pieces out of this, make it easier for people to file those petitions. And some wonderful researcher and designer named Jasmine Latimer was working on this along with other folks and with her partners in San Francisco DA's office, particularly Christine Soto DeBerry. And they were watching people go through this, and no amount of streamlining the process was going to make any real difference in trying to get what would be in the state of California, several, tens of thousands of people through, or actually hundreds of thousands of people through this process. And they finally came to the conclusion after watching people struggle and struggle and struggle that in fact, none of this was necessary at all. The way to clear criminal records is not to make it a little bit easier to petition. but to say, you know what? We don't ask people to petition when when the conviction goes on the record. That part happens automatically.
Mhm.
Guess what? These are records in a database. You can do a search on them, figure out all of the records that are eligible for expungement under this particular law, and then the next one, and then the next one. Suck them all down and change them.
Right.
There is, and I do think we sometimes miss this, that streamlining a process is only good when you can't actually just get rid of the process. Does that process need to exist at all?
Right.
And, you know, we only got there because we were listening to the people. 2 years of user research on this, watching people struggle, and we were listening to our partners in government. We understood why that wasn't easy, but we also were aligned around a goal. Why are we putting people through this? And we were able to, again, lift back up. Wait, what was the intention of this law? Are these things that are considered, necessary, really necessary? Can we really challenge that? Can we really elevate this conversation? And now it's across the country. In fact, Christine sent me something yesterday that now there 10 million more records have been automatically expunged. I don't think that's 10 million people. That's 10 million records. So however many million people that is, that's people who we didn't sort of torture through, a process that really treated them with enormous disrespect, but just gave them the opportunity that they deserved.
Yeah. And, that story resonated because I heard it at the Code for America conference. And I heard one of the speakers just talk about, like, you can't, volunteer at your kid's school, right? Like,
Yeah.
things that are part of your everyday life, you cannot do when you have a record. And so really recognizing how you all working with multiple local governments across the state to really figure out how to make that more easy, because you had all the information there. So I love it. And I think it's really, really important.
And
so
one of the people in the chat, if may I add, Edward writes, and it also saves taxpayers money to do it automatically. Thank you for that addition.
Yes, absolutely. Spot on, Edward, spot on. So I'm going to go to the Q&A. We have some questions lined up. I think the first one, Jen, is around, is it an ebook or a physical copy? I think people that registered are getting a physical copy. But I will say, like, I purchased a hard copy and I listened to the audio. So I think there are multiple options available for you depending on what you want to do. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't recall exactly what we've agreed with here. First of all, thank you to the organizers for doing this. I appreciate getting the book out. But if it's only a physical copy and you would prefer the audio or the ebook, they are also available. And I read the audiobook myself, which is really a lot harder than it sounds. So I really appreciate it when people listen to the audiobook because I put so much time into it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I thought it was great. I was able to, like, go back and forth, and I love listening and reading hard copies. So it was perfect. So let's talk a little bit. We have a question around coming from a flexible technology world where you can be remote. It seems like working in government is antiquated. What is the trade-off in culture, work-life balance?
Lucinda, would you like to take a stab at that, being somebody who's currently
Sure.
probably
I'm happy to share a little bit. I will say, I think we're all recognizing the things we've learned from having to have worked remote for almost 2.5, 3 years. And every organization is a little different. But I will say that I have seen a shift in really understanding the fact that people need work-life balance. And so I think those flexibilities exist. I think that's something that you just have to understand going into any, not just government organization, but I think just any company in general that you would consider working in. But I do think what's really important about the government work and what we're talking about here today is there's a need to be able to have time with the users, the public, depending on what your role is, so you can understand the impact. We've had teams at CMS, our digital service team, that have went out into the field and sat with members of the public to watch them click through government forms to see where they're getting hung up on certain questions in that process. So I think, there's a need to just understand when you're taking on a role, what that role is going to require. But I do think there are flexibilities, and government recognizes that. But in this role, there is also a need to really make sure you can be flexible with knowing you need to be where the work is occurring, working with those members of the public or internal business process owners to help them with those respective efforts.
Yeah. I think part of the trade-off is, it's not helpful to anyone here to say that the work isn't hard, because it will be.
Right.
I had lunch with a guy who works in public service in New York recently, and he spent a lot of the time, getting a little therapy, complaining about some stuff. And in the end, he said, I commute to work with folks who work at, big tech companies and in financial services. And the thing is, I'm happier. My job is harder, but I get such meaning and satisfaction from it. And this is the work that I want to do. And that is part of the trade-off. And it doesn't mean that you have to do it forever. I do think it's really important that this whole field thinks about sustainability. We come in, we see so much that needs to happen, and sometimes we can burn ourselves out. There's a time for that, I know, but there's also a time to figure out how to do this work sustainably. Because this is, as one of the Code for America team used to say, well, it's we all say it's a marathon, not a sprint, but he would also say this is generational work.
Yes, absolutely.
This is not going to get fixed tomorrow, but if we all keep working on it over time, it will get fixed.
Right, absolutely. And then I'll just add a little bit, like what I've also seen is this culture in government where your government family, the people you work with, become your family as well. So again, I would think that that's in any organization, but you journey together. You're working so hard to achieve the mission and to help those that you're serving, but you also journey together. And I think that's also part of why the work becomes so meaningful. It's hard, like Jen says, but it is so impactful. It's so meaningful. And it really touches on those people you know and love the closest, your mother, your grandmother, your parents, your siblings, the work that government delivers. So let me go to this question around, I noticed that of the 23 orgs represented today, only 12 are looking for people with 10 plus years experience, and only 4 of those have remote opportunities. Are government agencies generally not interested in experienced remote talent, or is this event just more focused on early career folks?
I mean, you may know more, Lucinda. I'll jump in and say this event, I hope, gets you excited about government service. And there are many opportunities for you to find the right thing for you if it's not here for you at this particular job fair. And there, you can reach out to the folks who are organizing this. I noticed actually that though this is focused on a particular region, we've got people from all over the country. So there may be opportunities in your area. Those opportunities also may be remote. It is definitely more remote opportunities than there were in the past, for sure. But don't let the set of opportunities that are in front of you here today limit your understanding of what is available. There is a lot available.
Absolutely.
And for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would also say government is looking for, and when I say government, I mean local, state, federal government. We're looking for people at all levels of career experience, right? It's not just one particular level versus another. We are looking for all career experience because each of us brings something different to the table of our experience and our journeys. And then just when you're thinking about agencies, and again, flexibility, it kind of goes back to my other point around, you really have to just understand what flexibilities does that agency offer. Some may offer more remote talent flexibility, others may not. That's something that you would have to just do a little bit more investigating. But I think you're going to find a good mix across government. So I wouldn't be surprised if what you're seeing. Trust me, there are plenty of opportunities in government, and so I would just kind of keep searching through that and definitely reach out to networks. as well to kind of help you maneuver through that process. Let's see, there is another question that came up, which is this question around, is there an agency working on fixing federal hiring processes? And I know, Jen, you've talked about this.
I'd love to speak to that.
Yeah, and there's some things I know that we've done at CMS and other agents I've done in some other jobs I've had, but if you can talk a little bit about that, Jen.
Yes, the person writing the question says that USA Jobs is a terrible experience, a black hole for resumes and applications. Yeah, it is. And have people noticed? Yes, they have. And are people trying to fix it? Very, very much. This is a foundational issue. I was just in DC for a couple of weeks, and I probably visited 7 or 8 different agencies. And the number one thing I heard is that we need to fix hiring. So it is absolutely being addressed by a wonderful team that is a collaboration between OPM and USDS. I don't think we'll have time to get into it, but I put in the chat a link to something I wrote about this team. The process is called SMEQA, Subject Matter Expertise Qualifying Exams. It does not really speak to how transformative it is. But that process scaling across government gives me great hope that we will be able to fix this. There won't just be SMEQA in the long term. There'll be other things like SMEQA that do what it did, which is exactly what I talked about before. Went back and said, what does the law actually say? And why do the processes and procedures that we use today not actually get us the outcomes that that law intended? And how might we reimagine them? And the more we do that, the more we fix these problems in government. I really love that and this is not about USDS, but the USDS, an organization that came to fix like quote unquote tech problems, gets looped into fixing problems like hiring, because the skills and approaches that service designers and user researchers and developers take to any problem are actually applicable to these problems of government processes that are getting us the wrong outcome. And so yes, I 100% hear you, and you should come on board, because this is exactly the kind of foundational work that's happening right now. And I would also encourage those who are going into state, county or local government to try to bring the SMEQA ideas to your government. They can use them too. And we fixing this foundational problem helps with all other problems. So I love that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question too. And I love having seen what the CMS digital service team has done with that, bringing on a number of product managers and data scientists and things of that nature. But also just recognizing it's a great avenue to make sure you have SMEs helping to really help through that hiring process. So we are getting close to the very end. Jen, I really want to thank you. I hope we have inspired many of you to consider public service. And I want to make sure that we also thank the Tech Talent Project, the Volcker Alliance, and the entire Tech2Gov coalition and organizing team for providing this virtual forum and job fair. Audience, please make sure you stick around for more great programming. And again, please consider government service. Reach out if you have any questions to any of us. And again, it's very impactful, and it impacts those that you love very dearly. So bring your talents to government. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you, Lucinda, and everybody. And thank you, everyone who showed up. I hope you stick with it. And as the inscription in my book says, don't give up.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.